guys, I'm Taylor, a librarian at the Christian County Library, and today I'm going to be showing you how to use Ancestry Library Edition. So first we're going to start out by just showing you how to get to Ancestry Library Edition. First you're going to want to go to our website, christiancountylibrary.org, and then you're going to want to click the Research tab. This will take you to a page that looks like this, and you will click Genealogy down here. Scroll down, and Ancestry should be the third option. Now if you're in the library, on your own computer or using one of ours, you can just click this Ancestry link right here and it'll bring you to Ancestry Library Edition. If you are not in our library and are wanting to access Ancestry Library Edition from home, you can click this link here for access to Ancestry Library Edition outside the library. This is not usually available, but is something that is available due to COVID through December 31st of 2021. So if you're at home in that time, you can click here and access Ancestry Library Edition for free from your home computer. Today, since I'm in the library, I'm just going to go ahead and click Ancestry right here. So this is the page it'll take you to. This is the Ancestry Library Edition homepage. First, we're going to go over just kind of talking about some of the main features that the homepage has. Over here, you have the beginning search, which is basically just if you're wanting to do an all-around search, just plug in some names. You can do that here and it'll take you to the search page. Over here, it has Receive Your Records at Home. This has a video that shows you how to send your records home or send them to your email so that you can have them for your records outside of Ancestry. Down here it has quick links to some of the commonly used records, such as census, vitals, military, and immigration. And if you scroll on down, there's more quick links that also have some of the same things. There's also quick links to U.S. Census records for all of the years of the census that you can access right down here. So if we scroll back up the page, we're going to look at this top banner up here, and we're going to see what some of these things do. So we're going to skip over search for now, because we're going to come back to that, and we're going to start at the message boards. So if we click that link, it'll take us to the message boards, and here we can search for keywords such as maybe the relative you're searching for, or if you're having a specific problem with Ancestry, that will be a good place to search to see if anyone else has had that problem and maybe found an answer for it. So one thing I do is I often will go to Google and I'll Google my problem or I'll Google my ancestor, and Ancestry message boards will pop up with this. So Google's a more kind of overall option to access the message boards to where it'll search more than just that. But if you have something that you think might be in here, that's a good place to start. Next, we're going to look at the Learning Center up here. Now this has all kinds of research aids for getting into beginner genealogy, or even if you've been into genealogy for a while and you're just wanting to learn more about specific records. So I'll kind of show you around this page a little bit. Here's Getting Started. This is for beginner genealogists. Here's some articles about using the census for different records. Here's Beyond the Basics. This is for if you've already done beginner genealogy for a while and you're ready to maybe move on and get into some less common records. Down here it tells you more about immigration, military, and ethnic records. And all these links down here will send you to different videos or articles that show you how to use these records. So if you click on Maps up here, you can also, it'll bring you to a map of the United States. And if you click on, say, Missouri, it'll bring you to a map of Missouri and its counties. And then over here to the side, it shows a little menu bar where you can click different things that'll help you it'll give you research aids for searching within Missouri for genealogy. So here's just an overall Missouri research guide. Then we also have Missouri Family History Research, Vital Records, Land Records, all the different resources here, and it'll show you how to go through and hunt for records within that specific state. So next we're going to look up here at Charts and Forms. So here is some free charts that Ancestry has on Library Edition for you to print out and use for your family. I like these especially if I'm researching for someone who is not my family to keep track of everything I'm doing. With my family, I tend to get a little crazier sometimes, but they're good for if you're just starting out and you want to keep track of everything you're doing. So here you have your basic ancestral chart, or they're also called pedigree charts. And here's where you can just keep track of, you can start here with you and keep track of your relatives going on back. So that's always a good place to start. You can start with one of these and just write down the details you know about your family. Over here is a research calendar. This just shows you everything that you've researched. That way you're not going back and looking in books that you've already looked in. It saves you a lot of time. Research extract. These are nice for if you don't just like kind of freewheeling it and typing everything into a Word document. This really gives you a form to see what information you definitely need from the document. Here's a correspondence record. I love these. I use these very commonly. And here you just have like a little place for when you contacted the person, their address and their name. So this can be their email address, their phone number, their physical address, why you contacted them, because you might end up needing to contact them later for some kind of different records. So you can see here what records you asked for in the past, the date they replied, and the results that you got from their reply. Here we have a family group sheet. This is kind of a narrowed in look at individual families. So you have your husband, your wife, and then all their children, and it's a little more detailed than your pedigree chart. So these are nice to keep on each individual family as you go back in your history. And then here's the source summary. I'll look at these real quick, but this is basically just all the places that you've already looked. So it's a lot like this research calendar up here. It's just in a little bit of a different format. Over here, if you click on Census Forms, it'll also bring you to a page that has census forms for all of the U.S. Census, as well as veteran schedules and slave schedules. And it also has some census forms for the UK and for Canada. So these are really handy because a lot of times it's a little bit hard to decipher the writing on census forms. So if you click on download, it'll take you to the census form for that year, and you can write in your handwriting all the information from that census. That way, if you go back, you don't have to take all the time deciphering the handwriting again. It also puts the different labels for the columns up here in case you can't quite tell what they are on the actual census. These I recommend filling out as you find the census records for your ancestor, which we'll talk about census records here more in a minute. But you can also, instead of using one of these, just kind of write it down in paragraph style and make sure you take all the same information. Either way is fine as long as you're getting that same information and in an easy, quick way for you to come and look back at. So now that we've looked at all the forms here, we're going to explore new collections a little bit. So this takes you to the card catalog. And this is something I will talk about at the very end, how to search in the card catalog. But basically, this shows all the new records that they have added to Ancestry. This might be they've updated some of their collections, or it might be they added entirely new collections. And it'll say whether it's updated or new over here on the side under Activity. So those are good to check if you've been doing Ancestry work for a while and you want to see if they have anything new, they've updated new, and you can find your ancestor in those records now. So it's not something you really need to look at unless you've already put in a lot of work into your ancestry, but it's good to have. So, like I said, we skipped over the search here, so I'm going to go back and we're going to look at the search now. So I double click on that. And here we'll look at everything the search page provides for us. So over here it has where you can enter your relatives' first and middle names, your last name, a place that you think they might have lived, and their birth year. If you click Show More Options, you can add things like a keyword such as their street address, what you think they did, or any other relevant information that you think might show up on a document. Here it has their race and nationality, their gender, or you can click on one of these up here and add information about their birth, marriage, death, where they lived, any other event, as well as other relatives that might be showing up in their records. What I recommend doing is starting with a fuzzier search or a more general search, maybe just your ancestor's name and their birth year and kind of where you think they lived, and seeing what records pop up. The more restricted your search gets, the less records will pop up, and the more chance you have of maybe skipping over some records for your relative that are just kind of in a funky place. So you can also scroll down here and explore by location. So again, we're going to use Missouri as our little test subject here. We're going to click on Missouri. If you hover over Missouri, it shows how many collections they have. Let me zoom out here. So 172 collections. And wherever you click on that, it'll show all the collections that have Missouri records in them over here on your right. So you can go through them and just look at certain collections instead of a more general search. Over here on the side of the search page, it has quick links to your special collections. Now these have a lot of commonly used collections such as your vital records, your census, immigration, and so on. So over here is good for if you're looking for a specific record, you can get a quick link to that and go straight to those records. So first, we're going to go back to this little Ancestry logo up here, and we're going to click on that, and it's going to take us back to the home page. What you want to do every time you're looking into a new ancestor that you haven't searched for before is look for their census records first. You want to make an outline of their life based on the census. Now, censuses were taken every 10 years. They're still taken. But the thing is, they aren't released for 72 years to the public. So, censuses are only available up to 1940 right now. Next year, 1950 will be released. So, you're probably not going to be looking for any relatives earlier than 1940, but in case you are, those records aren't open to the public yet. So what you want to do is you want to take the birth year of your relative and the death year of your relative and decide which years, how many censuses you're looking for. So today we're going to be researching my ancestor, William Clare Taylor, which happens to be my third great-grandfather and the guy I'm named after. So we know that he was born in 1876 in Cedar County, Missouri. He died in 1944 in Dade County, Missouri. He lived in Dade County for most of his life. He was married to Clara M. Bruce, and his father, Anthony Wayne Taylor, died when he was really young, and his mother, Nancy Jane Taylor, remarried a guy with the last name Clompton. So all this information will come into play as we search for records. But right now, we're looking for census records, so we're going to decide, since William Clare Taylor was born in 1876, the first census he should be on is 1880. The last census he will be on is 1940, which thankfully is open to the public currently. Now, we will want to look for census records every 10 years during the time he was alive. The only exception is for 1890, which was severely damaged during a fire and subsequent putting out the fire and got a bunch of water damage. Basically, none of it survived. So, unless you're in one of the few towns that really has census records left, which is very few and none in Missouri, unfortunately, you're not going to look for that 1890 census, and you're going to have a bigger gap of not knowing where your ancestor was. So with censuses, you want to start closest to the time they died. And that's because you're more likely to know information about them that's more recent than you are on your way back. You always want to work your way backwards, not to the present. So we're going to look for him in the 1940 census, which is the last census he would have been in before he died. So to do this, we're on the home page here at Ancestry. We're going to scroll to the bottom and go over here to where it says U.S. Census Records. We're going to click on 1940. And it's going to bring us to a search page that looks like this, where we can search records that are only within the 1940 U.S. Census catalog. So what we're going to want to do is just type in his full name. We're also going to type in his birth year, which is 1876. We're going to put in that he lived in Missouri. And that his wife's name is Clara. Then we're going to search. Okay, so we started out with a more general search, just the information that we know will definitely be on there, such as his name, when he was born, and his wife, basically. And we know he was in Missouri all his life. So if we go down through here, we're going to look at the names first, and then we're also going to look and see where they're at. Now, like I said, he lived in Dade County most of his life, so I'm looking in Dade County, or maybe a county that I know is around Dade County. So if I scroll down a little bit, I see a Claire Taylor with a spouse named Claire living in Dadeville, Dade County, Missouri, born about 1876, and is the head of their household. Now, it might throw you off at first with him being listed as Claire, but when you look back at his full name and you realize his middle name was Claire, it makes a little more sense. So, his wife has the right name, he's living in the right county, he's born at the right time. We're going to go ahead and look at this record. So if you just hover over the View Record, it'll pop up this list of indexed information. Not all information on a record is indexed. It's basically whatever a machine or a person goes through on a record and types out and saying, this is what they think it says. So it's not always correct. You always want to look at the record if it's available to view. But this is a nice quick way to look at it and make sure that this is the person you're looking for. You want to look at this record a little more deeply. So now you can either click See More up here, or you can just double click on this View Record here. So here it'll pop up the indexed information again. And then down here, it also lists other members that are in the household, their ages, and their relationship to the head of the household. So we see there's Claire Taylor, and Tresel Bennett. So it shows Claire Taylor as the head of the household, age 64. His wife, Claire Taylor, 60. Wife to the head of the household. And then Tresel Bennett, 12, grandson to the head of the household. So what we want to do up here, so we want to click this picture and it'll show you the actual census record. Now, since his middle name was Claire, we know that this is most likely him, especially with a wife's name is Claire. It gets very confusing with them both being Claire and Clara. But I happen to know that Claire is actually what he went by most of his life, which, like I said, makes it confusing, but it does help verify that this is the right guy. So here we're just going to go over a little bit of kind of what you can see on the census. So with Ancestry, whenever you click on a record, it'll highlight that family in the record, especially with Census Records. So here it highlighted Claire Taylor as the head of household and then the rest of the people in his household. So it shows their home values, whether they rented or owned their home, the number that they were visited in, and then there's a little X right here. Now this is not on all census records, but it's nice when it is. The little X, or sometimes it'll be a check mark, some kind of circle, there will be some kind of mark beside a name. That tells you who was the respondent. So that's who gave the information to the census taker. And depending on who gave the information to the census record, to the census taker, you can help determine how good of knowledge they had to the family and their living situation and how much you should trust that knowledge. So here it shows their relation to the head of household, or if they were the head of the household. It has whether they were male or female, their race, age, marital status, so on. If they're in school, it'll show the grade they're in or the last grade that they completed. It'll show their birthplace. And then you'll have other information about their city, county, and state on the last census, depending on the census you're looking at. Sometimes they ask you where you were at during the 5 years before the last census. So this is 1935 here, and it's asking them, did you live in the same place? And yes, they did. So it also tells you what kind of work they did, which William Clare was a proprietor of a barber shop, and it tells you how many weeks they work and what kind of income they make. So most of the stuff is on every census. They do differ a little bit from year to year, but this is kind of what you can expect when looking at them. So if you want to click this little arrow up here at the top, this will take you back to the indexed record page. And over here on the right, you can click Send Document. This will let you enter in your email. You have to enter it in twice, and it will send the document to your email so you can save it and not have to get back on Ancestry to view it. Over here, it shows you who provided the records. And if you scroll on down, it'll give you suggestions for other records to look at. Basically, what this does is Ancestry takes the indexed information from this record, plugs it into their little search algorithm, and finds documents that they think may be the same person as well. So these are really good to look at. Are they guaranteed to be the person you're looking for? No, you always have to look at the record and decide for yourself. But they're definitely good hints and a good place to look. So now that we have confirmed that this is the right person, this would be the time where you would fill out one of those census sheets. Or if you're like me, you might pull up a document, and that's where you can see what years where they were at during what years. So for this, I'm going to pull up the document. Okay, so here is a document where I have already went through and taken some of the important information from the census record. And I have done this for all the years that William Clare will be on the censuses. So we start in 1880, since he was born in 1876. And he's listed as William Compton, which remember, his dad died young, so his mom remarried. So he's actually labeled with his stepdad's name. He's age 3 in Cedar County, Missouri, and then it lists his mom and his stepdad. Here in 1900, we can see that he's moved to Dade County, Missouri. He's now married to Clara, and he has 2 children, Dorothy and Mabel. 1910, it's very much the same, and all the way to 1940, basically whenever we just did that census that we looked at. So here we can kind of see an outline of where he lived, how old he was, who was living with him. So we can see kind of a pattern of where we might look for records. So the next record that we're going to look for is we're going to look for a marriage record. So we're going to go back to Ancestry here. We're going to go to Ancestry's homepage by clicking that little icon in the top. And then we're going to scroll down to the bottom and click on Birth, Marriage, and Death Records. Now, it takes you to a search page that looks a lot like that census search page. And for this, you're going to want to enter in their first and last name, their spouse, and where you think they got married. So the problem is, we don't know where they got married. So that's where the census outline comes back into play. We're going to want to look and see where they lived right before they were married and where they lived once they got married, because you know it's going to be probably in one of those 2 places. So here we know that they lived in Dade County most of their lives together, and that William Clare lived in Cedar County before he was married here in the 1880 census. So we're going to assume that it's probably in Dade County, but if we can't find a marriage record in Dade County, we might check Cedar. So let's go back to Ancestry. We're going to plug in William Clare's name. we're going to plug in his spouse names, Clara. We're going to put that he was married. We're going to search Dade County first. And then we also probably want to put in a rough marriage year of when we think they got married. So how we're going to come to determine their marriage year is we're going to look at these censuses again. And thankfully, on some census records, it actually tells you how long someone has been married. So, in the 1900 census, it says for both William Clare and for Clara that they have been married 4 years. As well as on the 1910 census, it says that they've been married for 13 years. So that kind of matches up. So if we subtract the number of years they've been married from the censuses, we get about the year 1896. So we know that we can type in that number here and probably get pretty close. Okay, so we have his name, we have their rough marriage year. Now we can click down here on exact plus or minus, and we can say, we don't really know for sure, let's give it 5 or 10 years either way. And then we're going to click search. Okay, so this pops up a bunch of records for William Clare Taylors in Missouri, but we want to look at this first record here because it lists him in Dadeville. We don't know of him living in Sullivan or Jackson County or any of these other places, so we're going to click this one first. The thing is, it says WCF Taylor. Well, it's got the first 2 initials right, but we don't know about the rest. So let's hover over the marriage record. If we look over here, it says it was 1896, which is the year we calculated. It's in Dadeville, and the spouse is Clara Bruce. So Bruce is the maiden name of Clara, and it has her name. So we know this record is probably them. So let's go ahead and click on it. And over here, we have a picture of the marriage record. Now this is a good example of a lot of the information for the marriage record not being indexed. Just your bare basics. 2 of the names, the place, and the date. So let's go ahead and click on that record and take a look at it. First, we gotta find it on the page over here. I believe it's over here. And then we'll zoom in using these little buttons on the right. Okay, so it shows Dade County, WCF Taylor, which the F looks like it's faded, like maybe it was bleed through from the other side of the paper, or that it was something that was erased. So we can see where they got that F, but I don't think it was actually meant to be on that record. So we have a W.C. Taylor of Dadeville, living in Dade County, Missouri. And we have Clara Bruce, Dadeville, Dade County, Missouri. And since they were both so young, she was about 18, 19 at the time, and he was about 20. We also have their parents signing and giving their permission for them to marry. So here, if you didn't know their parents' names, this is a great place to go. So we have Clara's father, and it says that he's the father of Clara Bruce. And then we also have J.M. and N.J. Compton, which is William Clare Taylor's stepdad and mother. So this goes ahead and confirms any doubt we had that this is the right people, since it has that remarried name of his mother over here. And it's just telling us that yes, they consent to this marriage, all that stuff. And then it tells you when they were married, where they were married in Greenfield, which is just outside of Dadeville. And it tells you who officiated the wedding and who signed off on it. So that's a lot of information that you didn't see in the indexed record, which is super nice, especially if you maybe didn't know Clara's maiden name. You now have her father's initials, her maiden name, and you have the initials and the names of William Clare's parents as well. So marriage records are super good to look at. Like I said, always go to that actual image instead of just looking at the indexed information. So if you wanted to save this, again, you would send the document home, plug in your email, and it would send it to you. Next, we're going to look at death records. So over here, we're going back to that Ancestry homepage here, and then we're going to go to Search Vital Records. Over here on the side, it lets you narrow it down more. We're going to go to Death, Burial, Cemetery, and Obituaries. And then we're going to plug in some information about William Clare. So we're going to type in his name, just as we have been. We're also going to type in his birth year, 1876. His death year, 1944. And we're also going to put that he lived in Dade County, Missouri. And we're going to hit search. So here, the first option that pops up is a record called U.S. Find a Grave Index 1600s to current. So if we hover over that, it gives us the indexed information. It says William Clare Taylor has his birth date. He was born in Cedar County, all that information. Then it has his father, his mother, his spouse, and his children. So let's go ahead and click on that, and we'll take a look at that record. So this takes us to a page for the Find a Grave indexed record. Find a Grave is a website that's owned by Ancestry, but it's completely free to the public no matter where you're at. And it's basically a giant database of graves and people and where they were buried, and often is a good place to check for if you don't know someone's relatives, you want to see what their tombstone looks like, all kinds of stuff. So this information, it is crowdsourced. It will not always be correct. So you kind of want to use it for hints, and then maybe go back later and use those hints to find the actual records that back up that information. So if you click down here on the URL, it'll take you to the Find a Grave page for that person, where it'll actually take you to the website. You can see a bigger picture of the stone, and you can see all the information that they have there. So again, if we want to save that document, we'd go over here. But let's go back and let's look and see if we can find any other information about his death. So the second one here is Missouri U.S. Death Certificates 1910 to 1962. So let's go ahead and look at that. So death certificates are provided by the Secretary of State. And their page looks like this. So basically, death records are held back from the public for 72 years. Or not 72, I'm sorry, the census is 50 years. And then once 50 years is up, they get put on a website called Missouri Digital Heritage, ran by the Secretary of State. And they're available for the public to look at. So this is what their search page looks like here. You can search by last name, first name, middle name, years you think they died, and then narrow it down more by the county. So that's what that website looks like. Luckily, Ancestry's kind of integrated with it, and they already have that indexed information here, as well as a picture of the death certificate. So again, this is kind of like the marriage record. It has very little indexed information. It just has the bare bones, his name, the date, the place. So we're going to actually look at that record. And most death records are going to look very similar to this. They might be typed later in years. They might not be. But it'll give you the same kind of general information. And especially depending on who gave the information or filled it out, it might have more or less details. So here we can see that he died in Dade County in Dadeville. We have his name, William Clare Taylor. Did he have a social security number? No. Those weren't required till later years, and if you weren't leaving the country, you had no need to get one. His gender, we have his race, whether he was widowed, married, or single. Now, if you don't know if their spouse has already died yet, This is a really good hint because if they died before they did, it would say widowed versus married. And then it gives his wife's name, the age of the wife, and the birth date of the deceased person. Here it has how old they were when they died. And then it also has some more information about them and their family. It has their birthplace, their usual occupation, and then the names of their parents. This field right here will not always be filled out. It depends on who is giving the information. If it's filled out by maybe a nurse and there's no surviving family there to fill out the death certificate, a lot of this will really be blank. And sometimes, depending on who fills it out, it might be wrong. So you always need to find more records and kind of figure out what's right and what's wrong by looking at all the evidence. Here we can see that the informant was Clara Taylor. So we know that his wife informed on this, and she is going to have as good of a look into his life as anyone. So we know that this information is probably more correct than if a random nurse had filled it out for him. It also has the place of where he was buried, the signature of the funeral director, which is nice if you're going to look for funeral home records, and then their address and the date. Over here it has the usual residence of the deceased, so this will tell you a street name if they had one, what city and town they lived in, all that. And then over here it tells about how they died, estimated what time they died, and who was the person who attended to them and legally declared them dead. So all this information is on most death certificates. Like I said, it's kind of a treasure trove of information. So that's definitely one that you're going to look for your ancestor. Now, pre-1910, Missouri death certificates were not standardized or required. But there is a place on the Secretary of State's website, if I go back to it, where you can search pre-1910 death records. So to do that, you just want to go to death certificates. Okay, so now that we're back on the death records page, okay, we're going to search for one more thing. We're going to look at military records. Now, a lot of times, you might not know if your ancestor served in the military or not. So you're going to want to just kind of look at what wars may have happened during that time and if it was likely that they were drafted in any. So I know for him, World War I was going on when he was possibly of age to be drafted. So I'm just going to go to military records and type in his name, his birth year, 1876. And we're also going to type in that he lived in Dade County. Okay, and then we're going to hit search. Now the first one that pops up here is for William Clare Taylor, relative Clara M. Taylor, birth date 17th of February 1875, living in Dade County. We're going to go ahead and click on this record. And it tells us that it's a World War I draft registration card. So everyone of fighting age filled these out. Even if they didn't go to war, this was for the draft. So these are awesome. They have all kinds of information. So let's go ahead and look at this record. Over here, it has his name, William Clare Taylor. It has his permanent address at the time this was filled out. We have his date of birth, his race, and then we have whether he was a U.S. citizen. We have his present occupation, which was farming at the time, and that it was in Dade County, Missouri, that he was farming, and his nearest living relative, Clara M. Taylor, his wife, also living in Dade County, Missouri. Now, these registration cards had two sides, so you definitely want to scroll on over and look at that second side. This gives you some kind of vague information about what they looked like, but if you've never seen a picture of them, this is amazing. So it says his height was medium, his build was medium, he had blue eyes, he had brown hair, and then down here it tells you if he was missing any arms or legs, if he had any physical disabilities or anything, if he had any tattoos, anything like that that would distinguish him from someone else. So he didn't. But here's always a good place to check for stuff you might not know about. I have a third great grandfather on my other side who has a draft registration card for World War I, and it tells us about him missing a toe. Now that's information that you would not be able to get anywhere else, especially if any surviving family members are gone. So we're going to go back, since we've looked at that, and I know that he never served in World War I, but if he did, there would be more records to go on and look at. So now that we've looked for all the kind of vital records for William Clare Taylor and some of the common records, I'm just going to go in and show you a little bit more about Ancestry, and we're going to take a look at the catalog. So if you just click on search once, and it'll pop up this menu, and down at the bottom it says card catalog. Now the card catalog's kind of like the search. This just lets you narrow down what you're searching a little easier. So over here you can narrow it down by collection. So say we wanted to look in just the United States. We wanted to look in Missouri. And we wanted to see all the wills and probate record collections that they had. This will pop up all the records that fit that category for that town or those conditions that you're searching for. Over here it'll say whether they're new or they're updated. It'll tell you a little more about the collection, and it'll tell you how many records are in that collection. So if you go ahead and click on one of these, it'll take you to another search page where then you can go ahead and search for your ancestor. So the catalog is basically just a little bit more detailed search. It's nice for if you know what you're looking for. If you're looking for a specific type of record, I would use the catalog. But otherwise, you're going to be using this main search feature up here. That's it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. And I thank you for watching.